She said, let me tell you a little story. She goes, if a mother dog has a litter of puppies, if they have nowhere to stay, the mother will go find a home, leave the puppies behind. When she finds that home, she'll grab each puppy by the scruff of its neck and carry it to its new home. My mother, when she arrived in Toledo, Ohio, she was poor and alone. She really struggled. She didn't have any money. She didn't have any support. She didn't have her job yet. And she was interviewing at what was called Maumee Valley Hospital at the time. And when she got hired at Maumee Valley, which later became the Medical College of Ohio, she met Irma Jean Bennett, who was Mama Green's daughter. And they became best friends. Irma Jean was very sympathetic, loved my mother, helped her. And when I was conceived, my mother lived in a storage room in a basement underneath the pizza parlor right across the street from Medical College, Maumee Valley Hospital. And she had no money. She had no one to turn to. My mother was debating between an abortion and an adoption. And she couldn't decide which way she wanted to go. So she's crying in the kitchen at Mama Green's house. And Mama Green had just come up from the basement. And she looked at Irma Jean and said, why is Susie crying? And Irma Jean told her. So Mama Green told the story that transformed my life. She said, Susie, if you don't keep your baby, you'll be lower than a dog. She said, but I know you don't have anything, so I will raise your baby for you. He can stay with me. So my mother stayed on the night shift for 10 or 11 years of my life. So because she was on the night shift, I stayed with Mama Green for those 10 or 11 years. I went home on weekends. There was a couple periods where some things happened with my mother that I couldn't go home at all. So there was a couple periods where there were 3 months where I didn't even go. I didn't even see her for 3 months at a couple interludes. So I stayed with Bertha, and she and I became as close as you could ever imagine anybody being. She was my protector. She was truly, if ever the term guardian angel is a correct one, she was it. She protected me from street gang members. She protected me from drug dealers. She went to all of our sporting events, and people knew not to mess with me because they'd have to deal with her. So we were inseparable for the first 21 years of my life. And the bond was incredible. I've never seen one like it. It was a saving bond. It saved me. That's the truth. For me, she was an angel, but she wasn't an angel for everyone. So I had to really come to grips with the idea that my angel also had a very tough side. And there were people who were afraid of her because she had hands the size of Julia's Erving. Her fingers were thick. Her arms were humongous, and there was muscle. She wasn't fatty. She was just a muscular woman, and she had all that anger in her from having been abused by her stepfather. So if you crossed her, she's coming after you. She's not going to back down. So I had to come to grips with the fact that a lot of people were intimidated by her, but on the other hand, the thing I loved about Mama Green more than anything was the fact that she was also the tenderest person I knew. She would go down to the railroad tracks, bring the homeless up to the house, feed them, and then send them on. And she was a great cook. And all of my friends, she embraced this family. So she had this side where you don't cross her because she's coming after you. But if you respected her, she would do anything for you. So for me, I had to come to grips with some of her strengths and weaknesses, my relationship with my mother. And when I did, when I had reconciled the yin and yang of all those relationships, I was able to sit down and actually write. And based upon coming to grips with those, I was able to impart emotion into the book, because otherwise it could have been pretty sterile. And I decided it's not going to be sterile at all. It's going to be exactly as it happened, including the language, including the blood, including the violence, including the arguing. And the arguing was just, it was a war zone. I mean, my house was a war zone over me. Why did I write Dear Mama? That's a great question. It started about 30 years ago. I had dinner with the current chief diversity officer at Harvard University, Lisa Coleman, and she had invited Maya Angelou to campus, and I had dinner with Maya Angelou before I knew who she was, ironically. And we were having student sit-ins at the time over race relations at Denison. And the professor, Tony Stoneburner, who was residing over the whole dinner, told Maya Angelou that he has a very interesting story. And when I got done telling her the story about me and Mama Green, she said, you know, you should write a book about Miss Green. She said, it's a great story. And, you know, 25, 30 years have passed, and I was at a crossroads last year where my life was, you know, falling apart at the fray, and I wanted to reassemble myself. And in reassembling myself, I knew that Mama Green had saved me once, twice, and she was going to save me again. So, being my guardian angel, I allowed myself to be lifted up by her spirit and decided that I was going to go ahead and write this book. And I wrote it because it dawned on me as I approached 50 years old that I have the opportunity to help a lot of people. So I said, it's time. And I sat down and I started to write. For me to be able to write this book, I had to really come to grips with these three giant, strong women who all loved me dearly, but were in conflict with one another on how to do it properly. And it was a blessing and a curse all at the same time. So for me to make contact, I had to really make contact internally with Irma Jean, my mother, and Mama Green. And when I did, I was able to sit down and go, you'll see.